Welcome to the Finding Purpose podcast. My name is Adam. I am your host. I am so excited today to have my friend Alessia Adler here. She is a yoga master, and me and her connected through mutual friends, and I was really drawn to the way she talked about spirituality. And when I dug into her Instagram, I saw that she was posting these daily gratitude lists. And that's something that I had practiced myself. And we had a couple discussions and I learned more about her. And I was like, I need to have you on my podcast. Alessia.
Hi.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Something that really drew me to you was the fact that I could tell that you live a purposeful life. And I also could tell that you were unafraid of sharing it, and the vulnerability component, which oftentimes with people doesn't come as natural. I saw that you were very free in that sense. So yeah, I really just kind of want to jump into it with you.
Yeah. Let's go.
Tell me a little bit about, because we talked about what you're doing currently now. I really want to know the whole story. So tell me a little bit about the early days of Miss Alessia.
Baby Alessia, if you will.
Baby Alessia, yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
And thank you for popping my podcast cherry. This is my first time doing a podcast, so I was super excited. Baby Alessia was born in Italy, so I'm off the boat. I moved here when I was 2 with my mom. My parents are divorced.
Where in Italy?
I was born in northern Italy by Genova, Portofino area on the Mediterranean coast.
Okay.
So what I'm about to say is going to sound super spoiled and everything, but I went to school here with my mom, and then I would spend my summers in Italy with my dad and my whole family because they all stayed there. My grandparents and everyone was there. My mom remarried and came here. Everyone's like, oh my God, that must have been amazing. And I, at the time, was very much like, this is not amazing. I want to be here with my friends and go to summer camp and do all the things that normal kids do. Now, as an adult, I look back and I realize it was an incredible gift to have that experience.
Yeah.
But as a child and as a teenager, I was very much I just want to be with my friends.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Why do you think that was?
I think that when you're a child, you just want your familiarity and your surroundings. And as a teenager, you just want to fit in. And I grew up in Virginia Beach for a few years, and from 2 to 10. And it was the 80s. And it wasn't such a worldly place. We didn't have the internet because I was born in 1979. So I'm 44.
Okay.
And back then, when you left to go somewhere, you were gone. It was deuces, I'm out. And so you had to write letters or postcards. I remember buying calling cards to phone my friends from payphones. It was just a different way to live. My cousins in Italy were so excited when I would come because I would bring Guns N' Roses and Levi's jeans, and I introduced them to Nirvana, and I brought over the American culture. But the Italian culture on the American side wasn't as embraced back then. So I was the weird kid that had all Superga shoes and Lacoste shirts, but people weren't wearing that. And my mom had a weird Italian accent, and at the time I just wanted to blend in.
Yeah.
Whereas now I'm so happy to stand out in my own way and be authentic to who I am.
Yeah, it's so funny because, I've had similar experiences where it was just big changes, just at a young age, and you're thrown into this environment. And it's so funny in those early stages in life, you don't really embrace individuality as a value.
Right.
Where now it's so hard to find people who are genuine to who they actually are.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that everyone I come across is just fake or whatever, but I think it requires just this ability to completely be honest with who you are.
Yeah.
And
unapologetically too. And that took me a long time to reach, because when I was growing up, I grew up in a very abusive home. And so This was in Virginia Beach? This was in Virginia Beach. And so I was raised with a lot of being told that I was wrong and bad, because from a very young age, I always questioned people and questioned things. And you could tell me the sky is blue and I would look up and I would see it was blue, but I would be like, why? Mm-hmm. Why is it blue? Or we need to stop at the red light. Why? Like I would always ask why? And in my childhood, that was viewed as rebellious and like.
Who was doing the abusing? Was it like your mother?
So it was my
and
stepdad.
Your stepdad, okay.
Yeah. So he, from 2 to 10, he was abusive to me and my mom.
He was American?
He was Italian.
He was Italian, okay.
Yeah, but he is a prominent doctor. And we were like, this is where I always say, like, the book cover is not always what's going on the inside. And you never know what is going on between people behind closed doors. On the outside, we were this perfect family. He was a doctor. My mom, it was the 80s, remember? So she had 2 cars. We had a 2-car garage. That was not a thing in the 80s. We were members of the country club and the Rotary Club and the first pew in church. And like, we checked all the boxes, but behind closed doors, there was a lot of abuse. And so when you grow up in an environment of chaos and being constantly told that you're bad or you're wrong or you need to stop asking questions or just sit down and be seen, not heard, that's what I was raised with. And I am so grateful for my own strength and resilience because I never listened to that. Like, it never made sense to me, even when I went to church. And I do not mean to like insult anyone in their religious beliefs. Everyone has their beliefs and I respect everyone's beliefs. But to me, I was raised in a place where I would go to church and they would be like, pray and, God will listen. And I used to pray that it would stop.
Yep.
And it never did. And so after a while, I kind of was like, well, who is this person? Like, what is this guy that we are supposed to pray to? Because this guy is not listening. So that's where like the spirituality more started to resonate with me, where I believe in a higher power, but I just don't necessarily go with what's written in books. Yeah,
I mean, I think that's also like when things are like that at home, you alluded to like outwardly when you were young, you really just wanted to fit in, and it's
that was
driven by the fact that your home life, nothing is normal about
That's
it.
right.
So you want to go out and you go to school and you just want to have this like normal routine and fit in and surround yourself with like normal people because it's like you're living a double life.
That's exactly right. And it was just like, I just wanted to like not be seen because that's what was getting me in trouble, the standing out. But I also had this like drive inside of me to be seen and be heard and keep doing what felt right to me. So part of the reason that my mom finally was able to get a divorce is because I started doing research.
How old were you at that time?
So this was in 5th grade. So I was 10 and I started going to the library and just doing research on divorce and Virginia law. And like, finally I presented to her, it got really bad and we moved in with one of her friends and she was going to go back. And I was like, no, I was 10 years old and I was like, I'm not going back.
That's such a crazy role to assume at the age of 10. And you're essentially protecting your mother when the role should have been reversed.
And my little sister.
And
she was never abused. We always protected her. If he would hit me, I would take her away. And if he was hitting my mom, she would take her away. So she was always kind of protected. I love my little sister, but there was a lot of resentment that I had to work through to get past that. But yeah, I was very much
with your sister.
Yeah.
In the sense that you were always protecting her and she was always sheltered from the true ugliness.
Right. I mean, it was like she had no idea what was going on. And so I took on the role of protector for her and for my mom for a certain extent because she was scared. She was an immigrant to the United States and she had had a very privileged life being married to a doctor. And now she was on her own with 2 daughters and never had had a job. And she had a high school education, or she maybe had a college education, but it was an Italian college education, so like not the same. And that also propelled me to be so independent. Like I saw what my mom was going through and I made a decision at a very young age to not want to rely on anyone. For better or for worse, now as an adult, I recognized that like you need people, and it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to be vulnerable. But for many, many decades, and I'm talking decades, I had built such a wall around me because it was what kept me alive and strong.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I had my daughter and divorced her dad, and then started living a life that was very authentic to me, where I started to break down the walls. And really, yoga helped me. And I know it sounds so cheesy, but it did actually help me like become more vulnerable and learn that there's vulnerability, there's strength in vulnerability. It doesn't make you weak to ask for help and to say, this isn't working for me, I need to do this differently, or to say, I can't do it all by myself. It took me a long, long time to be able to say that and not feel like a failure.
Yeah, I mean, like the walls that you put up, I mean, you spearheaded your mom's divorce.
Yes.
You kind of told her how it was going to be.
Yeah. She was listening to a 10-year-old. I mean, the good thing I kind of had my wits about me, but yeah.
I mean, it's funny though, because like taking that role is so powerful, but it also doesn't give you the opportunity to really process. And, you know, you talked about how you were putting up walls, and that's trauma.
It is.
You know, you're traumatized. And, you know, it's almost like, you know, like for myself, there have been incidents like that where I wasn't myself for decades at a time.
Yeah.
And it's because I wasn't facing exactly what I was going through in those moments.
That's right.
And I think that's really like important now that, you know, you have that different vision. Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, like, why was I making these decisions? Why was I isolating? Why was I having mood swings? All these things that I was doing was a direct result of not actually facing the shit that happened earlier on in my life.
Exactly. And part of that is also like, sometimes you build those walls because they help you survive. Like you're just trying to make it through and get to the next day. And then you realize that what worked for you during that period of time isn't what's serving you now, you know?
Yeah.
And you kind of, and I think people kind of get stuck in that sort of mindset. Like, this is what worked for me, and this is who I am, and this is where I'm going to stay because it's what I've known and it's worked. And I think that there's a huge amount of power and strength in being able to take a step back at one point and be like, oh shit, this isn't working anymore. Like, it doesn't feel right. I'm not in alignment with where I need to be and what I want to feel and where I'm going. And so what can I do to change it? And that's hard. It's fucking terrifying.
Well, because you got to retrain exactly how you think.
Yeah.
You got to retrain how you're reacting to things. You got to also put the walls down and understand that, like, not everyone is like your enemy. And, you know, for a minute,
I want to be like,
you know, like, but that's the thing. It's so important.
True,
I think that, like, when you go through experiences where the people who are supposed to love you are the ones inflicting the most pain, it's really hard to trust anybody else.
Yeah.
You know, and it's really hard to truly let anybody else in.
Yep.
And, you know, that is like something I see prevalent in my own family members. You know, something that, frankly, I see a lot in my sister. And I love my sister, that she is my best friend in the world. And, you know, I've shared about how me and my sister found out we were adopted when we were 12.
okay.
And that's caused
big
reactions in us. That's huge. And that caused reactions in us that were very different, where I kind of exploded. And, you know, I don't really want to speak on my sister too much, but like she has taken a very guarded approach to letting people in. And I love that about her also, because she's my sister, and I'm like, hey, like, who are you talking to now? You know, and, but because I'm like the protective younger brother.
Right.
But it's also like, hey, you know, it's okay now. Yeah. You know, like the cat's out of the bag.
Yeah.
And we both are went through our own processes of dealing with it. I mean, that was her initial, you know, reaction, you know, and it just also attributes to, like, people react to things very differently.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. And there's a difference between reacting and responding.
Mm-hmm.
And that is such a powerful thing to recognize, because if you're reacting, that's a knee jerk. That's an instant, that's almost your ego that's fueling the reaction. But if you can learn, let me speak from when I learned to pause and learned how to respond versus react, it gave me so much more power, and it made my message so much more powerful in delivering it. Because if I was just flying off the handle, and listen, I'm Italian, I'm a Scorpio, I am a fiery little person. So like I'm calm until I'm not, and then everyone take cover. Like Jesus, it's about to go down. But when I learned to like take a pause, I call it a Mississippi minute. Yeah, go just MISSISSIPPI, just to say that a few times and just kind of like calm. Nice. You start to recognize that you can process what's actually triggering you. Yeah. Like where is this coming from? Is it what's actually happening? Is it about the garbage not being taken out? Or is it something bigger and you're just blaming it on the garbage? You know, like there's this YouTube video that I love, and it's this woman and man, and she's like, I just feel like so much pressure, and the camera's like really scanned in tight on her. And he's like listening and being really understanding. And she's like, I just feel like there's this throbbing and all this pressure. And then all of a sudden you see the camera pan out. She's got this huge like nail stuck into the side of her head. And he's being really patient and listening. And he's like, and he's like, maybe it's the nail that's in your head. And she blows up and is like, it's not about the nail. And it's like, but it kind of is about the nail, and you just don't want to talk about the nail that's stuck in your head, right? Yeah. So I think it was actually a Volkswagen commercial. I don't know like how or why they did that, but like it was this incredible commercial where sometimes we don't want to deal with the actual problem, because sometimes it's as easy as it being something that's like a nail in our head, and that's what's causing the headache. And if you just take that nail out, the headache would go away. Yep. But it takes a minute to pause and think about it versus being like, it's not about the fucking nail. Yeah. You know? Yeah. But well,
it's also like, you know, you don't want it to be about the nail.
You don't want it to be about the nail, right?
Like, that's the thing. It's like, sure, there's this huge gaping issue here, but it'll be so tiresome and so burdensome and take so much energy
and it'd be a lot
to
easier.
Address it.
Yes.
So let's blame it on the little things.
Right. And let me blame it on you versus taking a minute and seeing what role I played in this and taking accountability for your own actions and reactions and thoughts and your triggers. I mean, I always say the biggest red flag to me is when someone's like, I've never had therapy, I have no issues. I'm like, oh, sweet Jesus. Yeah. Like, run, don't walk. You have not done any of the work, and I don't know how to approach this, you know? Because especially when you get to be my age.
I think there's a lot of people who are there, though.
Oh,
I think, you know, really recently, and I really think it was like post-COVID, where this whole world of like personal development really blew up. I think that like therapy has, over the past 20 years, has become more and more mainstream.
Oh my God,
but
totally.
I also think there's a lot of people who go into a therapist's office and tell them what they want to hear.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I grew up in this household where also talking about your feelings was a no-no. Like, we didn't talk about...
That's an old country mentality.
It is an old school.
And I get that.
Yeah.
I get that.
That's it.
Yeah.
And so what's your background?
My dad's Indian. My mom's Persian Jewish.
Oh my God, forget it. Yeah, exactly. No one talks about their feelings.
No one talks about their feelings.
No, we just bury them and we just shove them down and we don't talk about it.
Yep.
And so I remember being a teenager being like, Mom, I want to go to therapy. And she was like, no. So when I had my daughter, I always joke when I would mess up with her, because as a parent, you mess up with your kid. Like, no, you're bound to do something that's going to screw up your kid. And I would look at the things that I would mess up, and I would go, that's not going to be the thing that she talks about in therapy. But every once in a while, the mess up was big enough where I would be like,
she might be bringing this one up.
She might talk about this one. Like, I remember one time we left her blankie at the airport in Nice because we were visiting my family. and it must have fallen between the chairs, and we had a connecting flight in Amsterdam. We land in Amsterdam. She's like, Mommy, give me my blankie. And I'm looking for the blankie, and it's nowhere to be found. And I realized it was probably at the airport in Nice. And I legit was ready to book a flight to fly back to Nice to get her that damn blankie, to miss our connecting flight back to the States and just redo everything. Now, I had no money at the time, so that was not happening.
Yeah.
I was dead ass broke, but I knew in that moment, oh my God, this is going to be something that she's going to talk about in therapy. Like, that was the first big, oh, I really fucked this one up.
Yeah.
But I think that
How old was she?
Now she's 17.
How old was she when that happened?
Oh my God, she was, 3.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was.
She'll remember that. Does she still remember that?
Oh yeah, she still remembers it.
Yeah.
Like, we talk about it. She's like, I wonder what happened to Blanky. My God.
It's like you're never gonna let me live this
Yo,
out.
I'm so never, like, I'm never gonna happen. She still has the other half. When her dad and I got divorced, it was a big blankie. We cut it in half, so each one of our houses would have a blankie.
Yeah.
And then I lost my half, so then his half went back and forth. And it became this thing of like,
don't leave it at my house.
Do not leave blankie behind. Like, no blankie left behind. It was terrifying at the thought of losing it. And if you're a parent and you've ever experienced this, my heart goes out to you, because it is the most gut-wrenching feeling of like leaving a precious, comforting something behind. And so when she became a teenager, I was like, she had gone through a lot with her dad and I getting divorced, and then I had been remarried, and I came out and married a woman.
Okay.
So I'm bi.
Okay.
And so my second marriage was to her stepmom, Alex.
Okay.
She and I are still friends. We got divorced, oh God, I don't know, 7 years ago maybe now. So I'm 0 for 2.
0 for 2. Hey, listen, it happens.
I mean, and so when her stepmom and I got together, she had known Alex since she was a toddler when we moved here post-divorce from her dad. So I'm jumping around a little bit, but basically we moved to Greenwich. I met Alex because she was the GM of the gym that I joined. Okay. We were friends for many years before we got together, and Alex was a part of our lives. And so when we ended up getting together, Bella knew Alex, so I kind of like talked to her, and I had raised Bella in a very open environment. We always went to the Pride Parade together. I always talked to her about just love is love. It doesn't matter who you love. It just, as long as they support you and you're happy. And so that didn't faze her, but I did recognize, like, she's gone through a lot with me. Yeah. She should probably process some of this stuff. So I was like, you should go to therapy. And this is also where finding the right therapist is so important.
Absolutely. I do want to go back to one thing that you said earlier about being reactive. Yeah. And it's so funny that you said that, because, one of my favorite books is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Yes. And that's what he talks about. He's like, you can either be reactive or proactive. Yes. So now we're going into parenthood, and how did you incorporate that? I mean, you're obviously incorporating therapy early was essential. Yes. Do you think that, I really want to talk about your therapeutic journey.
Oh my gosh, it's been a journey.
Like, when did that begin? Because once yours begins, then you can really hand it down to your children with the understanding of all the tools that you collect on your own therapeutic journey.
Oh my gosh, it's been such a journey. I started going to therapy in my late teens, early 20s. Before I got married to Bella's dad, I remember I started going to therapy. But to your point, I didn't have the self-awareness to speak the way I needed to in order to resolve the issues. So I was kind of like skimming the surface. Like, I was just kind of like dealing with the stuff that I could, but I really wasn't getting in the like ickiness of it, right? And I consider going to therapy like dating. Like,
What was like your first experience with therapy like? Because, I have like a bunch of different therapists throughout the years.
Yeah, me too.
And
I mean, it was great, but it was also, I think she was telling me what I wanted to hear, not what I needed to hear. And I think that was not that great for me. I mean, it was great in terms of like validating some of the things that I felt, that, about it's okay to be angry.
Were you
about
100% honest with them the first time that you were in therapy? Okay.
Definitely not. I wasn't honest with them, and I wasn't honest with myself. I couldn't have been. I was 20. What the fuck did I know? You don't know anything at 20. You have your head up your ass still.
And what pushed you into that room? No offense to the 20-year-olds
out there. I knew I wanted to start healing.
Okay.
That's exactly it. I knew I wanted to start healing, but I didn't know where to start, and I figured that was the best option. So it helped because it did validate some of the things that I had felt from my childhood. Like, it wasn't okay that happened to me, and it wasn't normal, and I did get moved around a lot, and I do have trauma. And so, like, it was refreshing to hear that versus constantly being told, you're fine, you deal with it, you shove it down, all that. And then through the years, I started kind of like upping my therapy game, if you will.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of... After Bella's dad and I got married, I went to another therapist, kind of working through my feelings around that, because my mom's been married 5 times. So I was I have a very colorful past.
Yeah.
And so I needed to like work through my feelings about that. When I got pregnant, I needed to work through my feelings because I was terrified. I was having a girl. I was worried I was going to perpetuate the cycle. How do I stop the cycle? I wanted to be proactive. And then I had terrible postpartum depression. I mean, it was awful. I felt so connected to Bella when she was growing inside of me. I suddenly had this like little best friend that was with me all the time, and I would talk to her and all these things, and it was so cool. But then she popped out. And by popped out, I mean 15 hours of labor later and a serious epidural. I looked at this like human next to me in her little bassinet in the hospital, and I remembered so vividly crying and looking at her and not feeling love. Like, I knew I loved her, but I wasn't in love with her.
Yeah, no, I mean, that, I can't obviously identify with that feeling.
Yeah.
But, something that strikes me is like that early journey with therapy, and then, having a child, and then also sharing that lived experience with your mom, having as many marriages as she had.
Yeah.
And, like, where do you think that your mom's experience with committing to in her relationships, and obviously, like, one of them she had to get out of.
Yep.
Do you think that had an effect on your approach towards relationships?
I think, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
How could it not, right? Yeah. I mean, it would almost be wild if it didn't.
Gotta ask those leading questions.
I mean, that was, thank you for that. That was really...
Yeah.
She definitely... I always said my mom would have been a really great aunt to have because she had all these incredible experiences, but as a mom lacked the stability that...
Was she like a super free spirit?
Yes and no.
Or is she?
She is now. She travels the world. She's lived in Thailand and St. Bart's, and I've always said, Mom, you need to write a book. Like, she really does need to write a book. It would be like, it would make Eat, Love, Pray look like nothing. Like, she just has lived such a life.
Yeah.
No offense to that woman. She wrote a very powerful book, but my mom could like run circles around it. So she was great, but like, yeah, it did mess with me because for a long time, I wanted that white picket fence life. Mm-hmm. And so I had dated so many assholes, no offense to my exes if they hear this, prior to my ex-husband. And he was the first one that came along that was consistent and stable and would call when he said he would call and would show up when he said he was going to show up. And I was like, oh, so this is what it's like. And so suddenly I found myself being this like suburban housewife. Yeah. And if you know me for more than 5 minutes, you know that that's not me at all. But I was trying so hard to have the life.
You might have gotten that from your mom.
Well, yes, partially, yes. But also I just really wanted that stability. Like, I didn't want to move around because at that point when I met him, I was 21 and I had moved 23 times.
Damn.
So
23 times.
23 times. Yeah. Okay. It was a lot.
Wow.
So I was like, I just wanted to like be somewhere, you know, and be with someone. And he provided that for me. And so, you know, I talk about this in my yoga classes. I did what you were supposed to do. We were together for 3 years. You're supposed to get married, even though I knew I shouldn't have. Like,
Yeah.
I remember vividly my best friend, and we were standing outside my wedding reception, black tie wedding. That's not what I wanted. I was wearing this ball gown and a tiara. That's not who I am. That's what he wanted. So I was like, okay. And I looked.
So what he wanted is what his mom wanted.
Yes. Right. And it was, I turned around to look at her and I was like, I don't want to go in there. I didn't want to go into my own wedding reception. And my best friend, love her to pieces. We've been friends since we were 12 years old. She looks at me, and I was 24 at this point, and she's like, you're wearing a fucking tiara and you're in a ball gown. You're going in there. She literally shoved me through my doors into my reception. And I was like, okay. And so I was on the...
You're on the path.
I was on the path, right?
Yeah.
We had
Here
2
we go.
BMWs, and we were
Yeah.
living in Scarsdale in a ranch house. And like on paper, we looked amazing. We were this cute couple, and I was working in fashion at the time, and he was working in finance, and we were great on paper.
It's so funny because that's the second time you've said that.
I know.
You know, about living this on paper life.
Yeah.
And it's just so powerful, like, to see like patterns when I talk to folks, and that's part of the journey of finding purpose. I
Yes.
feel where it's like on paper, like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yep.
I think I'm living a purposeful life. And one of the things for me was like, yeah, when I entered into the therapeutic space, my first experience with therapy was like consequence driven, where I like had gotten arrested. My parents were freaking out. And they're like, you need to go see a therapist. So early on, I've always associated therapy as a punishment.
Oh, interesting.
So, you know, like, and I would go in there out of fear of them reporting to my parents, would never be honest.
Right.
And I, you know, and I always viewed it as like a consequence or a punishment.
Okay. How long did it take you to come out of that feeling?
When I was like, when I was in my mid-20s, I had a therapist, and her name was Sinead, and I speak about her a lot nowadays because I recently reconnected with her. That was the only time where I actually listened to the therapist.
Oh, that's cool.
To what they were saying.
Yeah.
And, you know, like kind of like filed it away, but I didn't act on anything they said.
Yeah.
You know,
You weren't ready yet.
and I wasn't honest with them, you know, but I was like, all right, like I actually enjoy talking to this one.
Yeah.
You know, I don't feel
And it
like
didn't
I'm
feel like a
being
punishment.
judged.
Yes.
And, you know, that was that. My life continued. The pattern kind of just ran its track again. And it wasn't until this journey, the past 2 years, where I've really just been like, I'm jumping in head first.
Yeah.
And the number one requirement, I do work a 12-step program, and like a lot of that was intertwined into it because I also knew I needed to complement that with just like a deeper, more intensive deep dive into myself.
Yeah.
And so like I took everything that was offered. You know, my friend worked for a coaching company, sobriety and mental health coaching company. They offered me a coach, took it. You know, I was talking to
So
therapists.
that's like so good though, because that's also powerful when you get offered opportunities, and instead of saying no, this isn't for me, or no, that's not how I do things, or whatever, and being open to all different types of therapy, coaching, whatever it may be and look like, and saying yes.
Yeah.
Because that's how I think you end up finding yourself, is by saying yes to all things instead of just blocking yourself from something that you might have never thought to experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think to say yes to all those things, though, you really need to hit a bottom.
Yeah.
And, you know, like it was kind of this point of major desperation where I was like, I need things to get better. I am sick and tired of feeling this way. You know, my thoughts were very dark, you know, and, you know, I would never say that I was suicidal, because my ego is way too big for me to ever do anything like that.
That is some serious self-awareness. Yeah.
You know, but you know, there were very, very, very dark thoughts and very, I was isolating and, you know, in those moments, that's when like the people who really matter actually show up.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, kind of going back to what you were talking about, where it was like, for me, I was also able to identify patterns where, you know, where you said, we look good on paper, we look good on paper. And, you know, it's kind of crazy because like those patterns, once you identify them, I feel like in your story, then you're like, all right, now it's on me to break them.
That's exactly right. And that is, I love that you picked up on that because that's exactly what happened. On paper, we looked really good. And then I had my daughter and I went through all these crazy emotions, right? Because now all of a sudden I have this little girl in the world and I'm looking at her and I'm like, I want to do so much better for you, than what I had, you know? And so I started looking at my life in a very different way all of a sudden. I was like, this isn't me. Like,
did you feel like you were like on the outside looking into your own life?
Yes, I did. I was like, what the fuck am I doing here? Like, I'm not a BMW suburban Scarsdale person. Like, that's not that, like, that's great for the ones that are, but it's just not me. Mm-hmm. And so I started almost like rebelling, like becoming a teenager again. Like I just, like I went through, and I always say, I got a second chance at life through my daughter. And I genuinely mean that. She gave me a second chance. I got to relive my childhood through her by raising her. And so I got to have the fun and play and discovery and freedom to make mistakes and do things that I didn't get to do when I was a kid because I was so afraid of. I mean, I did it anyway, but
was a little bit about that experience about the first marriage, like just experiencing the safety,
yes,
experiencing the comfort.
Yes,
it was very opposite of what you had growing up.
Yes,
and you were like, all right, like this is. I feel safe.
That's exactly
my daughter's
right.
safe.
He made me feel safe.
Yeah,
and that was so comforting to me because I'd never felt safe before. And so when she was 2, it was a week before her second birthday, he and I were going to couples therapy, but it was bullshit. Like, we would go to couples therapy, we would talk about stuff, and she actually would often kind of not side with me because they're not supposed to take sides, but there were enough times where she was like, dude, what are you doing? Like, your wife is telling you exactly what she needs. You're just not hearing her. And I finally went to therapy on my own to our couples therapist. And I was like, I want a divorce and I want to tell him with you here. And so our next Friday appointment, we went. He didn't know what was coming. And it was, a little bit of a blindside. But honestly, it wasn't. Yeah. Like, there were so many signs. Yeah. At that point, I had actually told him, if things don't change, we are going to get divorced. Like, I literally said that numerous times. So,
I mean, it's the red flags that we choose to ignore.
Right. Yeah. And so by the time I actually had the balls to do it, I was 28 and I had a 2-year-old and it was his house and I moved out. And I moved into a 900 square foot 2-bedroom apartment in Greenwich because it was actually cheaper in rent than Westchester. And I knew the Greenwich school system was good. So I wanted to provide my daughter with a good school system. Yeah. And the divorce agreement was whoever was in the better school system got to keep custody. So I was like, well, fuck that. I'm going to get the better school system, right? So I moved. That's great. Winning. And I moved up here, and all my friends dropped me. I can count on one hand how many people stuck by me. And one of the people that dropped me was my mom.
Really?
She didn't talk to me and didn't see my daughter for 3 years. And it was wild that the woman who had been divorced 5 times and had gone through what I was about to go through was the first person to be like, you're on your own.
Have you ever asked her why?
No, because we can't have those meaningful conversations. She doesn't,
Really?
to this day. She's 69. I actually have a very healthy relationship with my mom now because I've learned to accept her for who she is
Okay.
and what she can provide. And I don't try to get from her what I know she can't. And part of that is closure and understanding because she won't talk
Yeah.
about it.
Well, it's so funny because like that was something like with my father, like we have that kind of relationship. We did. And for me, a lot of it was when I finally was going to be like, hey, listen, this is all the wrong that I've inflicted on you, And, part of like this journey has been going to folks who I've hurt and put through the ringer, frankly.
Yeah.
And saying, listen, I got to own that. Mm-hmm. You didn't deserve that. But like a big part of that process with my dad was trying to understand his perspective. And, like it was really important to me when I had this conversation with my dad and I was like, hey man, like, what did you go through when you made this decision? And, like that, like.
That's interesting. I've actually never asked my mom what she went through when I got divorced.
What was the process like for you? And,
Maybe I should.
Yeah. I mean, because for her, she might be like, listen, like you were safe and you had the life that I wanted. So it broke my heart.
I will say she was scared for me.
Yeah.
And she did say that to me. She was like, why? I will never forget. I was in the parking lot of my job and I called to tell her, Mom, I'm getting divorced. And it did explode into a whole thing where I was like, I don't want to be like you. I don't want to be in a marriage that I'm not happy in and feel stuck in. And she goes, well, it's not like he beats you. And I was like, so that's the fucking benchmark?
Yeah.
Like, because he's not beating me?
She's going off her own lived experience.
Right. And so that triggered me. And I was like, so that's the fucking benchmark? Like, if he's not beating me, I should stay in a marriage that I'm not happy in? Like, that's not the way this is going to work. And so that's when she was like, well, then you're on your own. And I was like, fine, I'll do this on my own. And I did. I mean, I moved up here and it was hard for Bella and I in the beginning. I mean, there were times where I had to really decide between diapers and formula and, money was tight. He didn't give me child support for a year and a half and I got no alimony. I didn't ask for it because I knew that if I fought for things, he wouldn't have, and I'm not painting him to be a bad man. He's not. He's actually a great father. He's involved in Bella's life. We co-parent very well, but he's cheap.
Okay.
And so he wasn't going to want to part with his money, And so I knew I was going to have to deal with this person for at least the next 16 years until she was a legal adult. And I saw what my mom had gone through with contentious divorces. And I knew that the only people that win in those scenarios are the lawyers. And so I didn't want to have a contentious relationship with him. I didn't want to spend thousands of dollars on lawyers.
Yeah.
And so I was like, you know what, just give him whatever he wants. I just want freedom. And I was like, and I will figure it the fuck out.
Yeah. So you're on your own. You're here in Greenwich, and you're a single mom.
Yeah.
And looking back, well, not even looking back, like how was the adaptation to just that lifestyle? Because throughout you moved 21 times.
Yeah.
You seem to have had to adapt to so many different environments. It was
terrifying.
Yeah.
It was literally terrifying. And then right as I got divorced, I got laid off. And so I was like, holy shit.
You're working in fashion?
I was working, at that time I stopped the fashion job and I was working on events planning. So I used to put on trade shows. And it was 2008 and the bubble burst. Yeah. And so events were not happening. And so I got laid off and I was with my 2-year-old and luckily, I was bartending, and so I started bartending full time, and I made ends meet for a little while. I started dancing in nightclubs, so I was like, very much on a mission of get in, get my money, get out.
Supporting,
like let me just do what I need to do to get by. And then, the universe works in such a crazy way, and this is before I really noticed the patterns and the power of a universal intelligence and really.
You were in survival mode.
I was in survival mode. I had so many walls around me, especially with dancing and bartending, and I had so many walls around me. And it turns out I was interviewing, and one of the places that I went to interview was a hedge fund. And one of the guys that interviewed me, we didn't realize it, but he was a regular at the bar where I was bartending. It was a nice, classy restaurant bar in Scarsdale Village, and he would come in. And so we connected on that level, and then because of that, he pushed me forward, and I met with the rest of the team, and I got hired as a receptionist at a hedge fund, and that's what started my full-time career in the finance world and gave me the income that I needed to support her, and I could stop dancing, and I
your
stopped.
Schedule could be normal.
More normal and everything, but my hours were 7 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. And she was going to daycare in White Plains. So I was dropping her off at 7 a.m. and picking her up at 6:30. And she was the first kid dropped off, last kid picked up. And that was the thing that I had always said I didn't want for her. But it was what it was.
During this, this period of time, what were you doing when it came to therapy and feeding your spirit?
At that point, nothing. I couldn't.
Yeah.
I was in survival mode. I wasn't doing therapy at that time. I was practicing yoga, but I was doing it on my own. I was actually, you know what? At the time, what my therapy was? I started training for the New York City Marathon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And
did you do it?
I did.
Nice.
Yep.
Well,
I turned 30.
I
turned 30 and I ran the New York City Marathon. So I was training with her, and I would go with my jogging stroller. I would never forget. This is before the days of iPads. Yeah. I would get her this little portable DVD player that I had gotten from Walmart. We would stop at Dunkin' Donuts. She would get 3 Dunkin' Munchkins because I would go for my long training runs, and she would watch movies on the DVD player while I pushed her and trained, and I would run something like 15 miles with her in her stroller.
That's wild.
So it was wild. I mean, but it got that energy out. And it helped me. And I would think when I was running, and I would process while I was running, and I would cry. I can't tell you how many times I would run a qualifying race in Central Park, and I'd be walking up Fifth Avenue, just screaming, sobbing tears, ugly cry. This was not a cute cry. Just openly sobbing with people looking at me. People would stop sometimes and be like, "Are you injured?" Yeah. And I'd be like, "No, I'm okay."
It's no.
I mean, I am, but I'm emotionally injured, And so that was my therapy. It was running. Now that I think about it, and then the therapy started up again later when I started to be able to afford it.
Yeah, no, totally, and obviously having the stability to bring it into your schedule. When I feel like your approach right now, is very, just, you're so deep into just the personal development and the spirituality and everything. And we haven't even brushed upon your second marriage.
I mean, there's so many things.
Yeah.
And it is Pride Month, so.
Yeah, I mean, we let's definitely discuss that. Now you have the hedge fund job. You said that you met your wife at the gym that you were working at.
Yep, she was the sales manager.
Okay.
And we met.
How big of a time lapse is this between the divorce?
So I joined the gym a year after I moved to Greenwich.
Okay.
And I usually would work out in the mornings. She was the evening shift.
Yeah.
So I never saw her. But one night I went in at night, and she was playing Laid Back Luke, which is a DJ, on the speaker. And I had grown up in the nightclub scene. I had been a cage dancer in nightclubs, so it was very much a part of my being.
Yeah.
And so I heard that, and I was like, yo, if this is what happens at the gym after hours, I am down to come here every night and work out. So I started actually going at night every once in a while just so I could hear the music. And so she and I started talking, and then she told me about Electric Zoo, which was a music festival in Randall's Island. Yeah. She had a girlfriend at the time, and she was like, do you want to come with us? And I was like, yes. I was still training for the New York City Marathon. I had run 17 miles that day, and then I went to a music festival and danced my ass off the entire day.
Nice.
And it was amazing. I was 29 years old. And or 30 almost, yeah. And
so this is 2010-ish?
This is 2009, about to turn 2010.
Yeah.
Yeah, somewhere in that range. And yeah, 2010-ish. And that was it. Like, we just became the best of friends.
Okay.
Literally. She was my, like, best friend. And we just started hanging out. She would date people and I would date people, and we would hang out and we would go out on double dates and just like do things together. And we did everything together. I mean, literally everything. She would help babysit Bella when I needed to bartend, because every once in a while I would bartend just to make some extra money. And then one night, it was after Cinco de Mayo, I think. Tequila was definitely involved. And I had gone to an all-girls high school, and so I had swung both ways throughout my whole life.
Okay. So it wasn't something that was new to you?
It wasn't new to me.
Yeah.
But I'd never...
been in a relationship with them.
Correct. Yeah. Like, it had never developed to that level.
Yeah.
And so we were hanging out, and she was going to leave to go back to her apartment. And I'll never forget, I looked at her and I was like, this is when it gets awkward. She was like, what do you mean? And I was like, because I want to kiss you. And so that was it.
Yeah.
It was like, that was it. But I should have known that it wasn't right, because she is a very emotional person. And at that time, I was not able to meet her emotional needs because I couldn't be that open to talking about my feelings. To be honest, I don't know if even I could to this day. I love her to pieces, but she talked about her feelings a lot.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, this is way too much for me.
Because you said we're kind of bottling up your feelings at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was the breadwinner, so there was a lot of stress on my shoulders now once we got together and she moved into our apartment, and then I bought my condo and I had saved enough money to put down a down payment. So it was like all this stuff was happening, but I was still feeling all this pressure, and I was still starting to be a little bit more vulnerable because I was allowing her into our lives and allowing her to help with Bella, which was a huge step for me. I'd never let anybody help with Bella. That's my daughter's name, Isabella, but I call her Bella.
Yeah.
And then we had been dating for 5 years. We were living together. And my Nonna passed away. And I was very connected with her. She was the one person in my family that loved me unconditionally. Just no matter what I did, no matter how many times I fucked up, no matter how many times I yelled at her, no matter what I did, she always loved me. And she was the one person that I knew would always love me.
Yeah.
And she passed, and I was shattered. I was literally, my world got rocked. And all of a sudden, I was like...
What year was this?
This was... Oh, God, we got married in 2008, so this was probably 2007.
Yeah.
Something like that. 2017. Wait, no. I'm terrible with years. I'm not good with numbers, which is ironic because I work in finance. But we got married. Did we get married in 2018? Yeah, because it's 2020. No, 20. What year are we in? It's 2024.
24. Yeah.
I don't remember what year
in the
we
late
got married.
2010s.
Right, somewhere along those lines.
So, like, having had those experiences, right? And and in the aftermath of your grandmother,
I felt like, who's gonna keep me alive if I die? That was literally what I was thinking. Mm-hmm. And I knew my ex-husband wouldn't, in terms of like keeping me alive in Bella's memory, because she was young still. And Bella was probably 8 or 9, maybe 10. Yeah, 10. So it had to be 2016.
Yeah.
Yeah, because she was born in 2006. Okay, we're piecing it together. We're getting there. So I was like, fuck it, I'm going to get married. Like, that was literally what made me decide to propose to her. And we went to Fortina in Stamford. It was April Fool's Day.
Fortina.
Yeah. Because we knew the owner, Christian. Yeah. I had been friends with him from like way back in the day. And so it was April Fool's Day. It was fucked up. I proposed to her on April Fool's Day.
The irony.
Yeah. And I gave her a ring pop. Because she didn't wear jewelry. And I proposed, and it was amazing. I mean, I thought I was marrying my best friend and everything. And then I should have known.
Yeah.
And I didn't.
I have a question, because like a lot of your story if you, because now it's like you're very like self-aware.
Yeah.
Now when you look back, are you like, damn, I ignored a lot of red flags?
Oh my God, yes. I was ignoring red flags left and right from both my marriages and relationships. And so many red flags. I was like, get out of my way. You're fine. Like I saw the red.
Why do you think that was?
Because I just didn't want it to not be right. Because I wanted so badly for it to work that I was like, I'm going to fucking make this work. But you can't force things.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I know like when I ignore red flags, it's either A, because hopeful.
Yes.
I'm really hopeful.
Yep.
B, I want instant gratification.
Yeah.
That's probably actually A. The reason why I ignore red flags is because I want it to be happening for me right now.
I don't know about
I don't think it out on the long game.
Yes.
And that's like a lot of the problem with my decision making in the past, where there were red flags along the way of my story, like every single time. And now in hindsight, I'm like, all right, I may have ignored these red flags. Consequences may have happened. People came in and out of my life, but now I try to look at it as I learned something from each experience.
I definitely don't regret anything.
Yeah.
Like I have.
I mean, it's a hell of a story.
Zero regrets. Oh, that's even like just scratching the surface. Like there's so much. So much more.
Episode 2.
But yeah, like I ignore them. I think for me, it's more the hope. Mm-hmm. I really, at the end of all of this, I really am a hopeless romantic. It's funny. I was actually just DMing with one of my students about this today because we were talking about Bridgerton, and she was like, "What's your favorite season?" I was like, "Bridgerton." I think season 3 is my favorite because there's so many great messages in season 3 of Bridgerton about authenticity and being yourself and putting yourself out there, but also being with a partner who loves you for who you are and accepts you and uplifts you for who you are, and that is something that I still struggle with, and because I am a very strong personality. And I do have very strong ideas and very big goals. And I have lots of things that I want to do and see and explore and go. And I have so much passion inside of me that it can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
But I'm hopeful.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I want to know a little bit more about like the beginning of you truly diving into like that spiritual journey.
That I give all the credit to, and I will say this until the day I die, to Amy, who's the owner of Connecticut Power Yoga. I had gotten certified years ago and had taught yoga through college on and off and stuff, and I'd kind of lost the practice. I practiced it on my own, but it was after my divorce with Alex, and I was a member of Connecticut Power Yoga in Stanford. And Amy was like, you should consider taking our teacher training. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, yeah. And so I signed up for it. And then I postponed it for a little bit because of things that were going on in my life, the divorce and all that stuff. And I started it back up again during COVID. She was actually going to not do it, but she ended up deciding to do it virtually with me and this other woman. And Amy pushed me. She and I were like oil and water. We butt heads. Like, we were two very strong female personalities. But she really pushed me to be vulnerable and look at all the aspects and corners of myself that I didn't want to look at because they weren't pretty. They weren't cute. They were ugly. And they were parts of me that I was not proud of. And so, to a certain extent, she broke me down to build me back up again. And I am very grateful for that because it allowed me to truly dive into where I am now and in my spirituality, in my journey, and my recognizing that the energy that you put out there is what comes back to you. And the gratitude post that I started posting was because I wanted to stop being angry. Mm-hmm. I wanted to get rid of this anger that I had inside of me that had fueled me. I mean, it had fueled me to push through so many barriers and so many obstacles and give this life for my daughter and me, but it wasn't serving me anymore. I was just angry now.
Well, it's funny because like a lot of times when, I could attribute a lot of the decisions I made to anger, and now having a much deeper understanding of negative emotion and positive emotion, it's rooted in fear.
Yeah.
And, for me,
It's scary to be vulnerable.
It's scary to be vulnerable, and it's scary to just say, like, I am scared of whether it's a consequence, whether it's losing someone, whether it's, you know, just making a big change in your life. There's always going to be a fear associated with it. And
Absolutely.
I've learned that, you know, for me, when I'm in the past, when I've been in those moments, it caused me to A, not think clearly, B, take that shortcut where it's like I don't have to bust right through that fear.
Yes.
You know, and go around the fear. And just because I went around it,
You got to go through it.
it doesn't mean it's not still there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you got to go through it to get to the other side of it. And it's scary and it's ugly. It's not cute. But on the other side of all of that is peace and is beauty and is finding true love for yourself.
Yeah.
And I say this in my yoga classes all the time. Self-love is the best love, is your first love. Because once you learn to love yourself first, the good, the bad, the ugly, because you're the one person that you're going to be in your relationship with for the rest of your life. It's you with you.
Yep.
People will come and go, but at the end of the day, whether you have a partner or not, it's you and yourself.
And you talk to yourself the most out of anybody
You
you're
talk
ever
to
gonna
yourself,
talk to.
exactly. And I've suffered from anxiety and depression, and people are like, oh, you're a yoga teacher, you must be so namaste. I'm like, fuck that. We are the most fucked up of the bunch usually. Like, there's a reason we needed to start to learn how to meditate and deal with all the things that we got going on, you know? And that's part of my practice. Like, when I teach, I do what's called yoga story time. And I tell people a story about something that's happening in my everyday life. And I weave it into a story about the practice of yoga and what does it mean? How does it translate to being on the mat? And it is very me, like it is very raw, unfiltered me. So is my social media pages. So is everything that I do. I don't want to put an image out there that's not me, because I don't want to have to worry about who am I?
Yeah.
Who, like, what you see is what you get. And I might not be everybody's cup of tea, but I'll be someone's shot of whiskey. That's someone else, something else I say. So it's just learning. So that process really helped me become who I am today. And now I have so much peace. And as Bella goes to college, we're actually leaving on Saturday to go to Indiana because she's going to Indiana University in the fall.
Hoosier.
Yeah, Hoosier mama.
Yeah.
And yeah, no.
That's a mom joke.
It was. I have to.
It's all right.
When I was at her high school graduation, once again, I realized, like, I am growing up with her.
Yeah.
She is graduating, but so am I. Because now I'm heading into my empty nester stage. And what's that going to look like? And what's that going to mean? And where am I going to go? And what am I going to do? And who am I now that I'm not Bella's mom? You know, I mean, I'm always going to be Bella's mom.
It's like a new chapter.
It's a new chapter. And it's exhilarating and terrifying because now the world is my oyster. And what does that look like? What does that mean? Where am I going with it? What do I want to do with it? And lately, the thing that I've been really reading on a lot is not being tied to an outcome. Putting an energy out there and putting something out into the universe, but not being tied to where that leads you. Like, and so
Totally.
That is,
I mean, I wish I could be more disciplined in practicing that.
it's hard,
It's hard,
but I know that, I have certain goals and I have certain things that I want to achieve in the next 3 to 5 years. And at first I was like, I'm going to do it this way and this way and this way. And I'm going to go here and here and here, right? And all of a sudden I started reading more and I started to realize, dude, if I put limitations on the universe, I'm limiting the possibilities that I don't even know are available to me. So I started to shift my thinking and saying, okay, I need or I would like for this to happen. However I get it, I don't care. But I want this to happen. And it was, at first it was a certain amount of money. And I was like, because I need that in order to get to my next step. And at first I thought it would mean more clients and having to work more. And then all of a sudden an opportunity presented itself where I was like, oh, I don't actually have to work harder. I just need to work smarter.
Yeah.
And if I had been so blindsided or so tunnel visioned on get more clients, that's what I need. I mean, I would like more clients, but like, but if I had been so focused on that, I would have never been open to this other situation.
Well, I think it's like so important, like that line of thinking. And it's almost like once you are daily working on that relationship with yourself and taking life as it comes to you, you'd embrace change as an opportunity, rather than like a point of discomfort.
Yes,
and and
it can coexist. It can
absolutely coexist.
An opportunity, and a point of discomfort.
Yeah,
because change is scary.
Change is scary, and I love how like now like you're going to be approaching this new chapter of your life, and it's just like. There's fear, but it's like that healthy, like excited fear.
So my word of the year is butterflies. I have 2 girlfriends, and every year we get together around the new year and we pick a word of the year. And this year my word is butterflies, because I don't want to do or hang out with people or go places that doesn't give me butterflies in my stomach. That mix of excitement and fear and obviously I can't do it all the time, right? Like, so there's some things like I still got to go to work, even though
got to go to DMV,
right? I still got to go to the DMV. I still got to do I still have to go grocery shopping. That doesn't give me butterflies, but I'll do it. But like
the things that you're selective about adding into
how I'm spending my time, because that is the most valuable commodity that you can offer to someone. Is your time. Like if I'm a busy person, so I'm like. I have half an hour to go grab lunch with you, and then I get blown off. I'm like, dude, that's, to me, it's more like, I don't care.
Slap in the face.
A little bit, because I'm like, dude, I just gave you 30 minutes of my time.
You know what? That's like one of my things where like that's one of my biggest pet peeves when people are late. Yeah. And the reason why I am always like, well, you were on time today.
I was on time today.
And so that's all that matters, you know? Like when people are just like, habitually late, and the reason why it's like this is something you can control. Don't complain about the traffic that you're in every single day,
right?
When
you know damn well it's going to be there,
and there's applications that can tell you what time you'll actually arrive,
right?
Regardless, at the end of the day, that's also something I can't control about them. But what I can control is whether I commit time to them.
Right.
Or
you can start telling them the wrong time to hang out.
Yeah, I've done that. I do that to some of my friends.
I will say I have some friends that know I'm consistently 15 minutes late to everything. Most things. So they will tell me, like, instead of getting together at 3:30, they'll be like, hey, can you get there at 3? And I'm like, yep. And then I find out it's actually 3:30 and I'm there 15 minutes early. So
nice.
I'm like, well done you. Like, you know me well enough to know that that's what you need to do for me. And I appreciate you for loving me and accepting me and knowing that I need that.
Dude, I don't know. I don't know. You got to work on that.
I do. I do.
I can't just go on that tangent about people being on time. I know. I accept your tardiness. I just can't do that.
This is where I say I am I am a masterpiece and a work in progress all at the same time. I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm bad at. I can admit my flaws, and one of them is being 15 minutes late to everything. Except today, I got here a minute early, and that was
love that.
Mic drop for real.
And I think that's really the root of like self-discovery, is that self-awareness and accepting yourself for who you are.
Yeah. And recognizing you're not perfect.
Yeah.
Nobody's perfect. And to all those people that stand on their soapboxes and they're all judgmental to everyone else, great. I hope that you are living in your happiness of perfection, because I'm not perfect, and I'm the first one to tell you all my flaws and be like, here's what I suck at. But here's what I'm also really great at. So take it or leave it. Work with me or not.
Yep.
And that's where we are. Like, even as a mom with my daughter, I'm like, sorry, sometimes I suck.
I'm not perfect.
I'm not. And I have always raised her and talked to her like an adult, even when she was a young child, obviously within reason. But I always presented myself to her as an imperfect human. Because I am. Yep. And I know kids love their parents and they put them up on this pedestal, but...
don't do that to me. Mommy has flaws.
Yeah, I've always been like, baby girl, I am not perfect. I've said that to her so many times. I'm going to mess up sometimes. And I am not going to always do or say the right thing, and I've always said this to her, but I will always love you no matter what you do. I am here for you 100%. So no matter what you do or where you go, I am going to be here for you. But just know that sometimes I'm going to mess up. And that is who I am, and you're allowed to mess up too, and that won't make me love you any less. And that's just
I love that.
Always how I raised her, because I didn't have that growing up. I had to be perfect. And who the fuck can, how boring would the world be if we were all perfect?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So I feel like we need to start winding it down.
What I want to do is kind of jump into this rapid fire question.
Okay, let's go.
That I do.
Yeah.
And my first question is, what 3 daily things do you incorporate in your spiritual journey?
Every morning, I have a routine that is very set in stone. I get up, I put on my rainbow unicorn slippers, I go and get my robe, shuffle downstairs, get my coffee, come back upstairs with it, and I read 5 minutes of a self-help book. Right now, I am reading Jen Sincero's You're a Badass at Making Money. And that's where I learned to not be tied to the outcome. I've read tons of other self-helps, the Atomic Habits. That's what helped me get my sleep chart in order, so I recognize the habit of my sleep. And then I meditate for 3 minutes. And people are like, I suck at meditating. No, you can't suck at meditating. You can have your days where your mind is quieter than others, but nobody sucks at meditating. So sit down.
And it's something you got to practice.
It's something you have to practice. Yeah. It's like working any muscle.
Yeah.
So that's how I start off my day every day, and I read positive things. I start off my morning saying, thank you, good morning, universe. Thank you for my morning. Thank you for this day. I get my coffee. I read my 5 minutes of motivational reading, and I do my 3-minute meditation, and then I'm off to the races. And then same thing at night. I do my evening gratitude every night.
Love that.
That I post. And that's it started as just a way for me to hold myself accountable. And then it just became part of my everyday life. So that is the thing that I do every day.
Love that. The second question I wanted to ask you was, what advice would you give to someone beginning their journey of finding their purpose?
What I said earlier, say yes. Say yes, and don't be tied to the outcome. That I would have never known to say that if you had asked me this question a month ago. So I'm really grateful that you're asking me now. This is again like where everything happens for a reason, right? We had recorded this a month ago when we first met. I would have never known to say that.
Yeah.
But definitely just say yes. Go after it. Never be like, oh, I can't do that. If you're scared of heights, maybe don't say yes to walking a tightrope, right?
But say yes to skydiving.
But say yes to skydiving, or say yes to trying it with a tether, or whatever the case may be. Say yes.
Walking,
because you never know where it could lead you, and don't be tied to an outcome. That is my biggest thing right now in finding a purpose, because I never would have thought to end up here if I had been like, oh, well, I'm going to do it this way. Because the universe took me for a total wild ride that I'm so grateful for, because now I have this amazing life that I'm still developing, because I'm heading into my next chapter.
Love that. And please, I would love for you to share with our audience how they can get in touch with you and what projects you have upcoming.
Yes.
And
absolutely. So obviously my Instagram page, Revolution Yoga by Alessia. That is the best way to get in touch with me, through DMs, or you can email me, revolutionyogabyalessia@gmail.com. It's a mouthful.
Or you can reach out to me and I'll connect you.
Yes, or you can reach out. Projects coming up. I am hosting my first yoga retreat in France of May of 2025. So that was one of my big things that I had on my vision board years ago. It is very exciting. I've aligned myself with this travel company called the Travel Yogi. And I love travel. I've traveled all over the world, and I wanted to combine my two things. I was like, how do I do this? Do the two things that I love and get to do it for work. And so that's my next big project coming up in May of 2025. If you're interested in that, I can send information. And then I have a bunch of little things always popping up. I'm doing a sound bath at Lifetime in Stanford. You should come to that. Honestly.
I can do that.
You can do
Oh,
that.
I just committed.
You just committed. Oh my.
There you go.
We got it
All right.
on tape now too. It's honestly, it's going to be such a chill event.
As long as my boy Tyler can come too.
I can invite both of you guys. I got you.
Yeah, there you go.
But there's a bunch of other projects that are all in the works that I'm really excited about, that are always just evolving and happening and growing. So stay tuned. There's more to come. I'm excited. I'm excited to find out what's more to come, honestly.
Love that. Alessia, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for
your
having
time.
me.
Thank you for being on time. And I
Yes.
can't wait for my audience to experience this episode.
Thank you so much, Adam. I really
Amazing.
enjoyed it. Thanks for popping my cherry.
Yeah, there you go.